Hi, everybody. Welcome to session 2 of the CPC Online Language Justice Interpreter Training. I'm glad to see some folks who were in the first session, and we also have some new faces. I'm Ada Bolkmer. I work at the Center for Participatory Change in their Language Justice Circle, and I'm hosting these sessions. Just a reminder that there are folks on this call who speak all kinds of languages, and English is our common language, and so the workshops are held in English. And for this one, we're going to need paper and pen. So if you haven't grabbed paper and pen, make sure to have that. So we're going to go ahead and do intros since there are some new folks on the call, and also just to like re-meet each other. But we're going to do quick intros this time. And what I'm going to ask folks to do is if you'll say your name, your pronouns. So when we refer to you, which pronoun should we be using? Ella, ex, he, her, they, and the city you were born in. And then you're going to pass it to someone else, okay? So this is like hot potatoes. You're going to pass it to someone else. So it's not going to be, my name is Ada Cristina Bolkmer Lozano. I use she, her, ella pronouns. I was born on a sunny day. No. We're going to do Ada, she, her, Brownsville, Texas, and I'm going to pass it to Gina.
Gina, she, her, Ciudad de México. Y se la paso a, Gina, she, her, Mexico City. I'll send it to Pravina.
Pravina, she, hers, Trivandrum City, Kerala, India. And I will pass it to, I'm bad with names. I don't know everyone. So.
Oh, there should be little clues at the bottom of people's names.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. I'll pass it to Monica.
Hi, I'm Monica. My pronouns are she, her, and I was born in Louisville, Kentucky.
And who do you, there you go.
Sorry. I'll pass it to Sasa.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sasa Rivera. She, her, ella pronouns. I'm also fighting something with Ada in solidarity. I was born in Panama City, Panama. So super easy. I will pass it off to, Gabriel's on this call. Gabriel.
Hey, y'all. My name is Gabriel. I use they, them, ella pronouns, and I was born in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico. Passing it to, can you raise your hand if you've gone? Gracias. I'm passing it to Amanda.
Hi, my name is Amanda, and my pronouns are she, her, and I was also born in Louisville, Kentucky. And I'll pass it to Elizabeth.
Hey, my name's Natalie. I don't know why it says Elizabeth. I use she, her, and ella pronouns. What's my boss's name? Elizabeth. And I was born in West Palm Beach, Florida, and I'll pass it to Carolina.
Hey, I'm Carolina. I was born in Mexico City, Mexico. Pronouns she, her, ella, or ella. I'll pass it to Catalina.
Hi, I'm Catalina. I use they, them, or ella pronouns. I was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Can y'all raise your hand if you haven't gone? I'm kind of new to Zoom. I'll pass it on. Oh no, there's two Annas raising their hand. To Anna with one N.
Hi, y'all. My name is Anna Miranda. I go by she, her, Aya, and I was born in Los Angeles, California. And I'll pass it off to other Anna, A-N-N-A.
Hey, I'm Hannah with two N's. She, her pronouns are great. I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And who has not gone? Did we get everybody?
Stephanie.
Ah, there she is.
Hi everyone, my name is Stephanie, her, she pronouns, and I was born in Miami, Florida.
Awesome. And then I think there's one person who called in. There's a 939 number who called in if they want to introduce themselves.
The 939 number. Me copian, me escuchan, hola.
Sí, pásale.
Okay. Bueno, my name is Anaís. I use she, her pronouns. I was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Buenas noches.
Awesome. Okay, I think that's everybody, right? So the last time we talked about when you were interpreting and you could, we talked about recovery techniques. So what happens when you lose the message, right? So today we're going to focus on vocab. A lot of you wrote in that you wanted to kind of like, you wanted specific kind of vocabs, whether that was reproductive justice vocab or nonprofit vocab or legal vocab. And instead of this session being like, here are all the words, this is the word for this, this is the word for that. I thought we could talk a little bit about ways that interpreters can grow their vocabulary, see? So this is where the marker and the paper is gonna come in. So the first thing that we're gonna do is kind of do like a game. It's like a game show game. I'm going to say a word, and then in your other, whatever language you interpret into, you are going to write down the translation of that word on a piece of paper. And I'll say like 1, 2, 3, and then we'll all show it at the same time, okay? So for example, if in English I said, the Center for Participatory Change, you would have, I'm going to give you all like 30 seconds to write down your translation, and then you would write it down like this. See? Not like this, because I cannot see that. You're going to write it nice and big and bold. Okay? Are we ready? The first word is going to be challenge. Okay, are we ready? 1, 2, 3. Show it. Oh. All right. So we have, Gina, will you put yours a little closer? Reto. Okay. So we have in Spanish, we have some retos, some desafíos, some barreras or obstáculos. And Pravina, will you pronounce, how do you say that?
Yeah, it's in Hindi. It's known as chunauti.
Awesome. Okay, check. The next word.
Ada,
Oh, yeah. Dime.
on my screen, mine showed up backwards. Did
Are
it
you
show
sure?
up backwards on everyone else's? See it? No? Okay, great.
You see, yeah, you see
Yeah,
yourself backwards, but we see it.
Okay,
correct.
perfecto. Gracias. Wanted to make sure I was writing in the right order.
I know this is an extra challenge. You're like, now write it this way. Okay, next word is going to be fellowship. As in, I applied for a 1-year fellowship to work with the Center for Participatory Change. Fellowship. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Ooh, okay. So I'm just going to read some of them aloud. We have in Spanish, beca or pasantía. I also put pasantía, although I don't love it. Natalie's just like, I don't. Natalie's just like, I don't know. Trabajo, so your work. Oh, Gabriel. What is Gabriel saying? I don't know.
It says, I don't even know, to be honest.
Beca, estudio, compañerismo. Okay, and internado. Aha. So what do folks think about that? That one had more different options. Anybody?
I think that sometimes some of the words don't quite fit. Like there's money attached to some of them, and others there are not, and that can be a really big difference, right? And it's not just like work, because it's more specific. It might depend on the profession, right? Like a residency is sometimes called a fellowship, and that's for medical.
That's interesting, because maybe I would then add like a paid, maybe then I would add the words paid to it somehow. Gina, be careful, because you just sent them to a boarding school. You gotta hear the false cognates. You're like, boarding school, internado. All right, third word, feedback. Feedback. All right. So let's see what words you all came up for feedback. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay, so we have opinions, opiniones, comments, commentaries, comentarios, retroalimentación, question marks, compartiendo sus ideas, so sharing your ideas. I would expand. Aha, very good, Sasa. So you would give examples of this or that. Yeah. So in Spanish, the formal word is retroalimentación, but I think those other ones that y'all gave are good as well. Okay. Next example, Black, as in the Black community. Okay, are we ready? 1, 2, 3. All right. Ooh, negrex. Okay, so we have some Afroamericano or African American, negro, negrex. Natalie, can you show me yours a little closer? Did you say Afro-Americans? Afroamericano or African American. Pravina, can I see yours a little closer? Cala, negrex, negro. Okay, so let's talk about this one a little bit. What did you all, you know, when we're interpreting, we don't have a ton of time, right, to make these choices. So that's why I'm not giving you like a minute per word. So what are some of the things that went through your mind when you were doing this translation? Because you made a choice, like you were making choices.
The first thing, if I can go, is that okay? Is there a way to raise our hand on here?
I don't think so. Not that I know how to do, no.
Okay.
Shit.
So Afroamericano is very specific, African American is very specific, but Black community, like that can take into account Black Latinos, just Black folks generally, right? Because anti-Blackness is also something that impacts folks generally and cross-culturally and cross-nationally. And so if we're talking about the Black community, we're talking about more than just African descendants of people in America, or people in America who have African descendancy, or diasporic people. We're talking about like people who are Black and considered Black or viewed as Black or read as Black. So that's why I chose the word negro.
Asa, do you want to say why you wrote what you wrote?
Well, I partly just wanted to show that you can raise your hand in Zoom if you can tell my little thingy bobber. But no, just echoing exactly what Gabrielle said, but also from my experience of what hearing the Black community identifies themselves as. Like, they don't say the African American community, they say the Black community, and relying on that to make sure that in those spaces, I continue to make sure that the word is used fluently. So.
How did you raise your hand? How did you do that little hand
So
raising?
I'm on phone right now because I'm multitasking. But you can, it's like goes to, oh, not that one. There's a more or like 3 dots there, and one of them is like raise your hand, yes, no, go slower, go faster, like instructions for the participants.
Awesome.
If you go under the participants tab, it gives the options of raising hand, yes, no, what she just said.
Cool.
But for me, it's under the participants tab.
Thank you. Anna, you wanted to say something? Anna. No, you just were playing with raise your hand? Okay. Anyone else?
Well, I would say that I think usually I do say negro or Black, but a lot of times in my experience living in Mexico, people always said moreno, like they thought that negro was like an offensive word, and they felt really weird about me saying negro. And so Afroamericano is like a way to sort of address that, but without saying moreno, which I think is imprecise or incorrect.
Yeah. What do folks think about that? Dale, Carolina.
And it might just be cultural, but even when I'm interpreting, I find myself either elaborating or wanting to list like negro o comunidad afroamericana, and I just need to figure out a way to maybe like be more comfortable with that, because in Spanish we use other words sometimes, or in Mexico at least, and so just learning that and adapting to it.
Okay, we're gonna go on to the next word, which is African American. What would you use for African American? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Afroamericano, afroamericano, afroamericano. Excellent. Great. Pravina, did your word change or no? In Hindi, did it change?
No, it did not. It did not, and I actually wanted to kind of talk about that for a minute.
Go for it.
So with respect to African Americans, I would probably use the word African Americans itself. But given the community that I'm used to interpreting to, I'm sorry, my pets are a little anxious today. So with respect to the community that I've been interpreting to, like when I say African Americans, they don't connect as much. So it goes more with the skin color. So initially when you said the previous word was the Black community. So kala is a word which refers to the color black. So when you say, like, although I find it offensive to say that way, I wouldn't say that way to someone else, but when I'm interpreting, I probably would have to use those terms because the community and the individuals that I am interpreting to would not otherwise connect to whom or what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think this is a good example of what makes us uncomfortable, right? Or what we think will make the listener uncomfortable. But when I asked you all African American, there's no problem with us, putting out there African American. But if I say Black, like there's a word for Black. Most of us know that word. It's not like a really difficult one, And so if someone is saying Black, for me, I think like, that's it, They've made a choice and I'm trying to go for the most accurate translation of that. Maybe that's not how I would say it. Maybe somebody would say it differently, but I think it was interesting because when you all submitted your words, there was a question of like, I want to know what's the most politically correct. And I was like, that's interesting, right? Like, is our role as interpreters to be politically correct or to soften a blow or to think about, or is our job as interpreters to interpret and then let things happen where they were. So I'm glad that we brought this one up. Is it okay if we move to the next one? See? Okay. Next one is racial equity. Okay, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3. Nice. Aha. Excellent. So the folks who also speak Spanish, there's some folks put equidad, and some folks put igualdad. So what's the difference between equidad and igualdad?
isn't it the difference between like equality and equity? If in English as our shared language, like equality is not necessarily like the most equal that we all can be, right? But equity really encompasses that, at least in the English language.
Right. Excellent. All right, this one's really hard for me. Intersectionality. I don't like when this one comes up. Intersectionality. Okay, 1, 2, 3. That's people's faces. Ooh, oh, okay. A ver. Intersección de identidades, interseccionalidad o cruce de experiencias. Okay. Interseccional. Or use the definition. Some folks use the definition. Awesome. Awesome. Look at how long that is. Ugh. These are one of the words that I'm like, am I making it up? Is this really a word, or did I just make up, am I just using English? But apparently it is a word. Interseccionalidad. Okay, we're almost done. 3 more. Empowerment. Empowerment. All right, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Empoderamiento, empoderarse, empoderamiento. I put dar poder a. Anna, what did you write? Anna Faf, what did you write?
I didn't know I made it up.
What did you make up?
Empoderarse. Like to be, like to give power to yourself.
Close.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a hard one. I think that this is a hard one. Anybody else? Empowerment? Anything to add? Okay.
Ada, I have a question. Why do you use dar poder a? Isn't it a different part of speech that way from empowerment?
I think in that case, if I was interpreting, let's say typical, like, you know, we do this work so that people are empowered. I guess in that sense, I would say, hacemos este trabajo para darles poder a, o para que esas personas tuvieran poder. I think because I feel like empoderamiento is not a real word, I think I would try to get around it. But I don't actually know if empoderamiento is a word or not. I didn't look that one up. So I feel like I would skirt around it.
Now it is a word.
Yeah.
However, the way, like, I've used fortalecimiento, but it just depends on the context, you know, because I would go to the semantics behind it, because in some cases it could be fortalecimiento, you know, but in some other cases they talk about, what's the other one? Habilitación, which I don't think it makes sense, but it all goes back to the semantics and what is, because empowerment, the word itself, to me, is kind of active, passive. So sometimes it could be habilitación, because the idea is that everybody has the ability to do something or is able to do it. So it just depends on the kind of context. But if I were to say, like, in a in a session out of the blue, empoderamiento, I would go for that one. But I don't know, it's tricky. It depends on what the message, and if we're talking about equity, like empowerment, the word itself kind of contradicts the idea or the concept behind it.
But I like your suggestion of fortalecimiento because that's strengthening. So it's kind of like a nice twist on it. And again, like the message is being passed. I like that one. I put some of these in the notes, and if you want to drop your suggestions in the notes too, that will help us kind of like build or in the chat box. That will help us build a glossary. Okay, bureaucracy. The next word is bureaucracy. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Burocracia, burocracia. Gobierno, yes, the government can be bureaucratic. Let me see, Pravina, yours a little bit closer. May expand. Okay, so this is the one I found. Can you read it? This is the one my friend texted his mom in India. And this was what she said. So, excellent. Bureaucracy. Cool. All right, last one, everybody. Another difficult one for me. Accountability. Accountability. We're going to hold them accountable. 1, 2, 3. Oh, okay. Okay, so we have some folks who want to rendir cuentas. Other folks are going to hold people responsible, hacerlos responsables. Rendición de cuentas. Nice, nice. Yeah, this one's hard. I think this is a hard concept for me, which I don't know what it means culturally, but yeah.
That one, that's a word that I've been kind of studying for years already, because as a culture, you can tell how there is not, like, the word doesn't exist in Spanish, and you cannot make someone accountable for something, you know? There's not that concept. You are responsible, like, it's something that you do, like, it's internal, it's not imposed. If you like tell you straight everything, but if you don't want to be responsible for it, then you can't. And that is a concept that in English that I've never been able to, there's not a word for it in Spanish at all, and it does talk about our culture, but
yeah. So Carolina just texted about liability, whether someone's liable, and the word I use for liability is like responsible, like you're responsible for it. So yeah.
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Yeah.
When you're interpreting and you're stuck between wanting to say exactly what the facilitator is saying and to keep true to the words that they're using, but when you know that it's contextually different in Spanish, so in that case too, it's like you would say responsibility because it is like, I don't know, I just like, how would you solve that? Would you use the exact same word that they're using translated in Spanish because you want to honor that, or would you apply your context in that case and use a different word knowing that the translation makes sense in that way? Is that clear?
Yeah. I mean, my teachers taught me about the message, about how you're trying to get the message across. And so interpreting is not word for word, right? Because the sentences are structured differently. It wouldn't make sense that way. And so I think about the message. And so if there is a word and I got it at that time, then, you know, I want to use that word. If there's a word and I can't grab it at that time, then I'll try to explain it like we talked about last week. The thing is, though, to be careful with, there is a word, but I don't want to use that word. Or there is a word, but I don't think they would understand that word because they're just feeling the, you know, paternalistic whatever here, you know? So I think there's, you know, all of these things are happening at once, but yeah, that's what I would say. That's what I would say. Excellent. So hopefully we have some new words from this activity. And I wanted to share some of the resources that I use when I'm interpreting. I'm going to share my screen. The first one that I use is word reference. Word reference is my friend. They have an app. It's really helpful when you go to an interpreting gig to have that on your computer or on your phone ready to go, or if you're working with a partner to ask your partner to have the word reference app. Someone, for example, had asked about bookkeeping, and then they just have they have the English and the Spanish, and then they have like this forum. So if you really want to nerd out, then they have this section down here where it's like, well, what about this kind of bookkeeping or that kind of bookkeeping? So word for reference is great. Another one that I like to use is Lingui. Katerina had asked about Living Will. And so Lingui uses translations, like how have things been translated before. So I like word reference for words, and I like Lingui more for like phrases. That's helpful because it kind of puts it in a context. Several of you asked about legal terms, and I just Googled like legal term, Spanish glossary, and one of the things I found was the state of Connecticut glossary. And so people had asked about felonies, right? And then here's like a different translations for felonies. I like delito. That's the one I like. Someone had also asked about dismissing charges. And so sobreser, desechar, declarar. So you can look for glossaries that somebody's already made, or you can also make your own glossary. And so, for example, for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been coordinating interpretation for the Southeast Immigrant Rights Network Conference. And so I just started to put all the words into this Excel spreadsheet. The organizers of the conference send me the agenda ahead of time, so I start pulling out words that I think are going to be difficult. And then I just start putting it into this Excel. That will help me when I'm interpreting. That will also help, like if I'm going to hire other interpreters, I would give them this glossary, and I would say, this is how I want you to do, you know, these are some of the words I think are going to come up, and this is how I want you to, or how the organization, because sometimes the organizations have their own glossaries, and they'll give you that, and they'll tell you, like, this is how we want this or that translated. So those are some helpful resources. And I think so much about vocabulary is about prep. And so before you show up at the gig, is the speaker that you're going to speak for or that you're going to interpret for already have a video on YouTube? Can people send you the agenda? Can you look at folks' website, start pulling out the words, you know, start writing those down. And then when you write them down, like make sure because I have like notebooks and notebooks full of this stuff. but then they just stay in the notebooks, you know? So I think I have to be a little bit more disciplined about dropping that into different glossaries and maybe make, workers' rights glossary, reproductive rights glossary, and then I would have that for the next time. Excellent. Is there another resource that folks want to shout out that you all like to use?
I think Google Translate has gotten way better than it was like when I was in high school and trying to do this kind of stuff. So some stuff, I mean, it really helps with translating, I think, more than interpreting, but I think it can be helpful. If there's something that's not on word reference, I'll go to Google Translate, and sometimes they help better with the phrases.
Nice. Anybody else? Resources that they like to use? I think other humans are also great, when I have a group of friends that if I'm interpreting, I just will text them and be like, oh my God, help me. Somebody today texted me powerlifting, and so then I'm over here looking for powerlifting. I think that, your compas, your partner, your peers are also another great resource. And it's also good to kind of troubleshoot and workshop words together. When you're going to a gig, what are we going to say for accountability? What are we going to say for, the organization's names in the other language? So your compas are a great resource. Awesome. Okay. So I was talking about prep. And one of the tools that I use is something that we call a vocab tree. So before I go to a gig, I'll think about what is this gig about, and what are some of the words that can come out of this gig. And then I like to draw, as maybe you all have already noticed. So let's say if I was going to do a vocab tree about CPC, I would think about CPC as the tree. And then I know that CPC has a racial equity program, so there might be words about racial equity. I know that CPC is a nonprofit, so maybe some nonprofit-y words are going to show up. I know CPC has a language justice program. And so what are some of so those would be the branches. And then what are some of the words that would come out of that? So in the language justice program, maybe the word would be interpretation or translation. And then I think about what are the translations of those words? See, so the vocab tree is helpful to just generate ideas. So what we're going to do is we're going to try Zoom rooms. I'm going to send you off into little breakout groups with 2 or 3 other people. And you're going to create a vocab tree together. So the first thing that you want to do when you get to the Zoom room is pick what's your topic. And some of the topics that you all talked about were legal, nonprofit, it could be LGBTQ vocab, it could be reproductive justice, social justice. Somebody talked about idioms or expressions. So what's going to be the trunk, right? And then what are the branches? What are some of the smaller concept within that bigger concept? And then what are some of the leaves? What are some of the actual words? And then find the translations of those actual words. So I'm going to send you off into the breakout groups for 10 minutes. And then you'll come back and we'll share a little bit about what we discussed. Are there any questions before I send you all off? No? Okay.
Before you send us off,
yeah.
I have to leave at 7.
Okay.
Because I have a fundraiser event tonight. So if you'll put me in a group with 3 people, that would be great.
Awesome.
Gracias.
And yeah.
Zoom rooms. So do we need to do anything, or do we just stay put and you sort us out? I don't know how this works.
Yeah. So I don't know if this works. I'm going to send you off to a room, and then you'll be there, and then I'm going to bring you back. I don't even believe, but okay. All right. I'll see you in 10 minutes. Awesome. I think everybody's back. Cool. How did it go? Oh, nice. Okay. So I'd love to hear back from the groups. If someone from the group can tell us, like, what was the topic? What was the tree? And then 2 of the best words that you came up with and their translations. So let's start with group number 4. Oh, you don't know what groups? Do you know what groups you were in? Oh, you do know. Okay. Let's group with group number 4. Excellent. And maybe if we haven't heard, who was in group number 4? Raise your hands. Brenda. Just Brenda. Brenda and Anna? Okay. Cool. So what was your topic and what were the 2 like show off words that you want to share with your compañeros? No, but
I can go just really quickly. We spend a lot of time just talking, about our topic. The topic that we decided to focus on was medical and pregnancy. And we had a lot of branches off of our trunk. Sort of looking at like the routine medical words that were there, some nutrition and psychosocial things, delivery, behavioral health, and reproductive justice, and like how to say all those things. So I would say maybe the 2 things that came up for us, one was the word doula, which we were like, well, do most people in English know what that is? Do they? And sort of how to explain that. And then I guess we also talked about how that there are a lot of cognates, and I was saying that for somebody who has worked in medical, I don't know how many of the words I learned are false cognates or real cognates, but it's because I work with a bunch of English speakers, and so like when you talk about the strip, it's like the strip like that you put on your belly, like that. And maybe that there's probably another word for that, but like that's what I always learned. But yeah, we talked about how because a lot of words are Latin based and Latin root, that they are actually cognates.
Nice. Awesome. Okay. Thank you. Group number 3. Who was in group number 3? Carolina, Gabriel, Sasa. Okay. Will you tell us about your trunk and 2 of your best words?
Yeah, I have the tree, so I can say stuff. So we did, you're not gonna be able to see it. We did immigration nonprofits because we all essentially work in that respective field. And some of our branches was government, specifically like immigration proceedings, organizing terms, and nonprofit bureaucracy. So a lot of that was like in time. We had a lot of branches because we understood that like we play many roles. And from immigration proceedings, we had like ICE and then like ISAP between those, because those are all new words that you essentially have to like explain, but also that it are new concepts for people depending on the language and or like understanding of immigrant proceedings. One word that we were talking about is like griete.
Grillete.
Yeah, and then like grassroots, de base, or like Carolina brought up a really good point of like explaining what the organization does rather than saying like organización fines de lucros, like a nonprofit organization, because like that's what the IRS knows about us, but like what does our community know about us? So those are good. And I'll stop talking now.
That's awesome. Thank you. Cool. Group number 2. Who was in group number 2? Catalina, Monica, Pravina, Anna. That was a big group. Okay. Anna or Catalina, will you go since we haven't heard you as much? Who's gonna go? Who's gonna go?
Sure, I can go.
Okay, there you go.
Since we like had multilingual group, we didn't get deep into all the translations. We spent a long time like defining what our branches were, and what we settled on was immigrant rights as like our main branch, and then I personally found it difficult to split up the sort of like legal system and all the sort of little branches, because I work at a legal pro bono legal resources for children nonprofit, so I'm like, yeah, there's ICE and the court and USCIS, which are all different, and then on another hand there's like vocabulary for people with documents, and then also undocumented people, and then vocabulary about your rights with law enforcement, and the vocabulary about nonprofits. So we got into all those definitions and not so much in the actual translations. We got lost in the branches.
That's okay.
It's very interesting.
That's awesome. I mean, that's good. That's good. Then later you could do the branches the leaves if you wanted. You could do the leaves if you wanted. Listo. Group number 1. Last one. Amanda was in that one. Who else? Gina, from her face, I think I could tell. Yeah, Gina, Natalie. Okay. Who wants to tell us about your tree trunk and your words? Do it. Do it.
You mute me?
No.
Oh. You want to go, Natalie?
Oh, wow. Okay. We did Head Start, which is an organization that Stephanie is part of. It's a nonprofit. And from what I got, the organization does a lot of supports families, specifically like low-income families, into placing their young children in, preschool? And so Head Start, and Stephanie specifically, her role is like asking questions and going through an application process to see how much support the families might need. And different responses get different points, which means that they're put ahead in the line, right, Stephanie? I don't want to butcher your organization. So we talked. I think we did really well, like knowing how to define things. The one piece that stuck with me was enrollment and application. Some of us were like, we would translate application to aplicación, and then Gina was like, nah, I'm taking a class, and that's actually not how. That's like one of those words that we took in English and make in Spanish, and it's actually solicitud.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that we talked about that I thought was really interesting, because Stephanie mentioned that sometimes even if you know a word, she'll use the word that the family is using, because she's trying to keep the language common and understood. So that was, I thought that was great. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. Awesome. So you all we learned some new words together. We shared some resources. You now have some trees and branches and leaves. You have some homework if you want to try to fill in some of those leaves or fill in some of those branches. I want to say before we close that although, how can I say this? I know some interpreters who know all the words. They know all the words. And they are not very good interpreters. And I know some interpreters who don't know all the specific words, and they are really good interpreters. And so I think interpreting, just to remind ourselves that interpreting is not just about vocabulary. It's about intonation, it's about recovery techniques, it's about tone, it's about volume, it's about a lot of other things. And so not to get stuck on like, I don't have the words, or I don't have all those legal words, or mi español, you know, I need to practice it. Like, yeah, we should be practicing and we should be expanding our vocabulary, but not to know that vocabulary is just a part of it. Vocabulary is just a part of it. And so I just wanted to leave you with some tips about like expanding your vocabulary. Other things to do would be to read, like read in the other language, and then taking down, like, you know, highlighting or however you want to do it, like writing it in your notebook. What are the words that you're like picking up from reading? I look at my phone all day, la verdad. So I switched my phone over to Spanish, and I'm like, oh, that's how you say that. That's like the fancy Spanish way to say that. I'm like, aleatorio, who knew? Shuffle, okay. Writing, you know, if you're journaling, if you're text messaging friends, writing people, listening. Some of you already talked about like listening to music, listening to podcasts. Again, for me, it's helpful because my Spanish is very like North Carolina Spanish. I like to listen to podcasts that are coming out of Latin America. And I can send you some of those if you want for the Spanish speaking folks. And I'm like, oh, this is how people in Chile are speaking, or this is how people in like Costa Rica are speaking. And that's helpful to pull out some words too. And watching stuff like tonight, if you're going to watch Netflix, put the subtitles in the other language, and then you're going to be picking up vocab and saying like, oh, I wouldn't do it that way. Oh, that's interesting. I would have never thought about that. And so none of this is going to happen by itself. Like your vocabulary is not going to just automatically expand by itself. It's going to take some practice. It's going to take a little bit of homework. But I think that there are fun ways to do it that can be helpful. Or watch Rebelde. What else? Or watch Rebelde. Exactly. Just all watch Rebelde. Super, compas. So that's it for this session. I will see you all next week. I think we, just to let you all know, I think we have the topics. I think next week is going to be LGBTQ and queering language. I think the week after that is going to be ethics, because you all talked about like the right role and what should I do and what should I not do. And so we're going to do ethics part 1 and then ethics part 2. So unless something dramatically changes, that's the plan for the rest of the sessions. Super. Excellent. So buenas noches, all of us with Kleenex. I hope that we feel better. Lots of liquids. I'm glad we're not in person. Listo. Okay. Bye.